A routine day at a busy suburban shopping plaza turned into a scene that would spark outrage and headlines across the city. Two officers moved in quickly, handcuffing a black woman near the store entrance as bewildered shoppers stared. In her hand was nothing more than a receipt and a shopping bag, but that didn't matter in the heat of the moment. The woman's calm, steady gaze contrasted sharply with the officer's tense movements. What no one realized, not the customers filming on their phones, nor the officers making the arrest, was that the so-called suspect was one of their own, a respected police captain who had dedicated her life to upholding the very laws now being used against her. Captain Renee Collins was widely known within the department for her integrity and commitment to fair policing. Off-duty that afternoon, she had stopped by the large department store to pick up a few gifts for her niece's birthday. Nothing extraordinary, just a simple errand after a long week. Dressed in jeans, a dark green t-shirt, and a light jacket, she blended in easily among other shoppers. Her badge and service pistol were locked safely in her car, as she preferred not to carry them when running personal errands. Inside the store, Renee browsed the aisles leisurely, occasionally smiling at children trying out toys nearby. She chose a small set of art supplies, a brightly colored backpack, and a pair of sneakers for her niece. Everything was scanned correctly and bagged at the self-checkout kiosk. She even double-checked the receipt before leaving the counter. Outside, a pair of patrolling officers had been alerted by a store employee who claimed a woman had slipped a piece of jewelry, a large gold chain, into her shopping bag without paying. The employee, who had only seen Renee from a distance, pointed her out as she walked through the automatic doors toward the parking lot. Without verifying the accusation or reviewing camera footage, the officers moved quickly. To them, it looked like a routine case of shoplifting, another suspect to process before their shift ended. They called out to her to stop. Renee turned, puzzled, as they closed the distance. Before she could speak or show her receipt, one officer ordered her to step aside and began handcuffing her as a small crowd formed. Phones came out. Murmurs grew. A sense of unease settled over the scene as shoppers whispered about the accusation. The moment the cuffs clicked around her wrists, Renee's heart sank, but her training kept her composed. Years of dealing with tense situations taught her that calmness was often more powerful than protest. She maintained steady breathing, keeping her voice level as she asked what the accusation was, though her words were largely ignored. Bystanders reacted with a mixture of curiosity and unease. Some muttered about how common such incidents were. Others shook their heads, sensing that something felt off about the arrest. A few began recording, their phones capturing the image of a black woman in cuffs beside two white officers, one of whom now held up a shiny gold chain for others to see. The chain had been found near the register moments earlier, but there was no evidence linking it to Renee. Still, the officer held it aloft like proof of guilt. The glint of the metal under the afternoon sun added a strange, almost theatrical quality to the scene. As the officers escorted her back into the store for questioning, Renee noticed the familiar body language of colleagues, who seemed more focused on speed than fairness. She remembered training recruits to carefully verify facts before detaining anyone, to avoid assumptions that could lead to injustice, lessons that now seemed forgotten in the rush. Inside the store's small security office, the atmosphere was charged. The store manager hovered nervously, eager to appear cooperative with law enforcement. The officers began asking sharp, pointed questions, failing to notice that their suspect remained composed, neither defensive nor evasive. Renee's eyes drifted toward a wall-mounted monitor, which showed feeds from multiple security cameras. She could see herself on one screen, clearly paying at the self-checkout kiosk and collecting her receipt, a quiet, factual rebuttal to the accusation. Meanwhile, in the parking lot, a small crowd had gathered. Whispers of profiling spread quickly, as some bystanders commented on how swiftly the officers had acted without evidence. The recording phones captured not just the arrest, but also the uncomfortable expressions on many faces, witnesses to what felt like a rush to judgment. Back in the office, As the questioning dragged on, Renee realized the officers still hadn't asked for her identification beyond her name. Her wallet, containing her police credentials, was in her jacket pocket. She chose not to reach for it yet, knowing sudden movements could be misinterpreted. She understood that the weight of assumptions was often heavier than any actual evidence. For now, she let the scene play out, aware that the moment of revelation would be inevitable and telling. When the shift supervisor from the precinct arrived at the store in response to the incident report, the mood in the cramped security office shifted abruptly. He entered with brisk efficiency, nodding to his officers before glancing at Renee. Recognition flickered across his face, followed by visible confusion. "Captain Collins?" he asked, startled. The words were not meant for theatrics, but carried enough weight to freeze the room. The two arresting officers looked at each other, their confident posture faltering. In a few clipped sentences, the supervisor demanded an explanation. The officers recounted the accusation, mentioning the store employee's claim and the discovery of the gold chain. Renee remained silent as the supervisor turned to the monitor. The security footage replayed the transaction at the self-checkout. Renee scanned each item carefully, bagged them, and collected the printed receipt. No sign of theft. No chain slipped into her bag. The supervisor's expression hardened as he turned to his officers. The weight of the misstep became unmistakably clear. He then asked Renee, respectfully now, for identification. With calm precision, she reached into her jacket pocket and produced her badge. The gold shield gleamed under the fluorescent light, a stark contrast to the suspicion that had driven the arrest. A heavy silence settled in the room. The realization of their mistake, and the implications of how quickly assumptions had replaced due process, was undeniable. The cuffs were removed quietly. Renee flexed her wrists, the faint marks on her skin a silent testament to the ordeal. Outside, the crowd began to disperse as words spread about who the woman actually was. For many, the incident felt both unsurprising and yet profoundly disheartening. Another reminder of how bias could shape perception in an instant. Later that evening, Renee sat in her car in the parking lot for a long while before driving away. She had handled countless tense situations in her career. Yet this experience felt different, personal, in a way that cut deep. She thought of the young recruits she had mentored, the training sessions where she had emphasized that fair policing required more than following procedures. It demanded awareness, empathy, and restraint. The very principles she had championed had been disregarded in her own case. News of the incident spread quickly. Clips of the arrest circulated online, sparking debates about racial bias in policing and the need for stronger accountability measures. Some defended the officer's quick response. Others argued that their rush to judgment was yet another symptom of systemic issues. Renee chose not to dwell on anger. Instead, she decided to use the incident as a teaching moment within her department. At the next precinct meeting, she shared her experience candidly, not to embarrass her colleagues, but to highlight the cost of assumptions and the importance of making measured judgments. In interviews that followed, Renee spoke publicly about what had happened. She described the scene not as an isolated incident, but as a reflection of challenges that still needed to be confronted. Challenges of perception, implicit bias, and the responsibility to see the person before the label. The image of her standing in handcuffs under the afternoon sun became a symbol, sparking conversations in community forums, schools, and precincts across the city. As she reflected on the day, she realized that change often begins with discomfort. This kind of forced both individuals and institutions to reconsider long-held habits. And so, the incident that began as a wrongful arrest transformed into a powerful reminder. Justice is not merely about laws written on paper, but about the fairness practiced in every interaction. How many other lives could be spared humiliation? Or worse, if everyone, officers and citizens alike, paused to question their assumptions before acting?